Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Tanatsei Gambura. I am the program producer at Africa in Motion, and I'm joining you from Edinburgh, United Kingdom, where I'll be hosting this conversation from. So African Motion is an annual film festival that takes place in Scotland, consisting of film screenings and complementary events. Now in its 16th year, African Motion has established itself as a major annual event within the Scottish cultural calendar, whilst also maintaining an international profile as one of the leading African film platforms. We are so pleased to be screening the film The African Who Wanted to Fly, a film starring Gabonese national Luc Bendza, the first Black man to attend the Shaolin Temple in China, who then goes on to star in dozens of Kung Fu films. The African Who Wanted to Fly was nominated for the Francophone Cinema Trophies in the category of Best Documentary Feature in 2016 and won the Special Jury Prize at the Festival Escale Documentaires de Libreville. My French is terrible. in 2015, and the prize for Best Documentary Film at the Burundi International Film and Audiovisual Festival in 2017. And with that, I'm so delighted to welcome our guest, Samantha Biffot, the director of the film. Samantha is a Gabonese director and screenwriter who was born in 1985 in Paris, France, and grew up between Asia and Africa. In 2007, she obtained a license in cinema with a specialization in editing from the ESRA, the Superior School of Audiovisual Production in Paris, and began working as a production assistant. In 2013, she won the prize for Best African Series at FESPACO for Eye of the City. Thank you so much for joining us, Samantha.
Thank you so much for having me, and really happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. So I'm just going to go straight into the questions. Obviously, we absolutely loved your film, which is why it's at our festival this year. It's a really unique story and one we were not expecting to kind of be, so pleasantly surprised by. And so we're just wondering, I'm so curious to know what interested you in Luc Bendza's story and prompted you to make this film.
What interested me was the way it was brought up to me. I was in Gabon and I was asked by the head of cinematography of Gabon to send African films to a festival in China. And I was very curious, saying, oh, there's an African festival film in China. And he said, yes. And it's the Gabonese who's doing it. And I was saying, wow, because we're not a lot of Gabonese people. We're only 1,800,000 people. So it's always surprising when you hear of other Gabonese in other parts of the world. So I wanted to know what he was doing. And he told me, oh, he's doing this, like, I think, Kung Fu stuff and whatever. And he kept on going, but I was stuck on this saying, oh my God, a Gabonese doing Kung Fu in China, what is this about? So I Googled him and I saw his extraordinary life and journey. And I was completely shocked that he wasn't more known in our country and talked about. And so I was obsessed with him. I grew up in Asia, a part in South Korea, back in the 90s. So I know what it is to be Black, biracial, colored, and people looking at you very weirdly. So when I heard that it was back in 1985, that it was Black in China with a very conservative society in a conservative discipline, which is wushu, I was amazed to see how did he manage to do it. So that's how I got obsessed with him and asked to have his contacts. I wrote him a mail. He was very suspicious at beginning. One day he came to Gabon, we met, had a drink, and he decided to go on board with the project to tell his story.
That's phenomenal. And it's such a good thing to hear about your own kind of experience living in East Asia and being really empathetic to that experience of being a different person in that part of the world. And so the film uses many interviews with the people who are really close to Luc to tell his story. And he also speaks about himself at length. And so I'm wondering in what ways you can contrast or parallel the narrative that Luc's friends and family gave against the one he gave of himself? Kind of, are there the two different kind of presentations of the same person, do you think? Or, how do they all approach this character of Luc Bendza?
Well, when I talked with Luc, at first, it feels like he really have distant memories of his childhood and doesn't see it as extraordinary or out of the ordinary. And when I talked to his friends, and he made an impact on everybody who knew him in his neighborhood. And I came back like 20, 30 years after, and they still talked about him. And everybody, I mean, I had to cut down so many testimonies of people in his neighborhood. They all had something that happened to them, and they still remember it. But for Luc, for him, it was really not that important, or he doesn't realize how he had an impact. And also his journey he has such a strong mind. He doesn't see the obstacles the way he talks to you. It sounds so easy, but when you talk to his friends or even colleagues in China, you see he had to overcome so many obstacles, but he's someone who only focuses on the goal. And that's what I really was impressed with, and saw the difference. He's on the goal, He doesn't want to talk about the obstacle necessarily.
And I mean, you spend a lot of time with Luc, and it sounds to me that he's someone who, has really strong values. Like I'm hearing humility. He's really sounds really strong-willed and really sure of himself. And so, as a filmmaker, is there anything you learned from him about how to approach your own craft, your own profession, and how did making this film influence the projects, and the process, or even like just personally yourself right now?
Of course, definitely. When I following him, I think I thought to myself, "You will never complain ever," because he's such a strong example of will, that if you want something, work for it. Of course, it's going to be hard, but you can achieve it. And he had to overcome so much greater obstacles than I do in my crafts, that I always thought, oh, when I wanted to complain, oh, but Luc, so shut up and do your thing. And so I think it gave me so much strength watching him, and I forgot the rest of your question.
No, I was
Sorry.
just, I mean, that's absolutely it. I was just asking, like, how did making this film influence the projects that you're working on now, or in the future,
Sure.
or the process?
Definitely. There was a short movie that I will be going in writing residency to work on it and direct next year. It's been in my drawers for years and years and years, because I had issues with the characters and its attraction to a foreign culture. And I felt like it was not believable or credible at all. But then I met Luc, and here you have a little boy in the 70s who is obsessed with Chinese culture and is pushed to, and has defined his whole life. And I feel like seeing that, it gave a lot of complex that I had with this story. And it helped me actually go back to that story and write it.
Mm. And I just want to talk about the actual filmmaking, right? And your crafting of the visual language of the film. There's some really powerful shots where there's one intimate one I really remember, when I think you're in a vehicle with Luc and he's asleep, and you catch him in this intimate moment, whereas in his wakefulness he's this kind of joyful, energetic person. And another shot where the camera's focusing on him and he's running across the screen in this kind of forested area, and this kind of contrast to that first kind of shot that I spoke about, because here he's in his full life and he's running, and there's a lot of high energy in that moment. I'm wondering what what are the decisions that came into how you wanted to portray Luc on screen, and the actual process that you took towards your cinematography?
Well, I think that one of the what's fascinating about documentary is that you take decisions as you filmed. My first approach was really to tell his story to talk about to his friends, talk with him. But I quickly realized that since he's has as his own wife says, he's more Chinese than the Chinese. In his mentality, he will not talk about himself. He will not talk about his feelings. I had to trick him actually to have him break actually in front of the camera and tell us very intimate things, because he's this warrior, as I said. So it's like, and I had to, I think what it taught me, I mean, for a documentary, is your relationship with your character, that you, at some point you need to connect and not be afraid to tell them what you want or what you need to them. Because as I was filming, I was sending rushes to my producer, who was telling me, okay, he's like a Superman. He doesn't show any flaws. And the audience won't emphasize, have empathy for him because he's so perfect. And I had to have a long talk with him. And the producer, remember, told me, talk to the wife. It's the wife that break them. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking to his wife, and it was a great, actually, it was a great, how do you say that? A great advice, because as I talked to the wife, I saw a completely other intimate side of him. And she told me, oh, please do, because I'm myself fed up with him being so strong and not showing his emotions. And that's why we tricked him, actually, asking him, when did you fall in love with your wife? We had prepared that with his wife to trick him. And I think with this documentary, it taught me to, you need to have different approach, different angles to characters, and not be afraid to use their relationship with their wives, other friends, to go into this intimate and confront them with that, because sometimes it creates and break them. And I know that it completely changed his approach to documentary after we had this talk, and he decided to talk about his intimate things. And actually, it's in front of the camera, he talked about his dead brother. He had never told me about that. And it's that day I saw the darkness is in his eyes. That's how I got to take this essence out of someone who was so controlled and didn't want to show any feelings. I don't know if I answered what you were asking.
No, absolutely. I think that's really powerful to kind of think about, your own process of like, okay, how do we get this emotional, vulnerable core out of someone who's otherwise really stoic and really controlled? And I'm wondering, did Luc share any feedback about that process, or any feeling towards you in private, off screen, about how that process was for him? Was it something that he appreciated, or something that was still quite uncomfortable for him?
We had one, just before it broke, we had one heated discussion, because I was telling him, I need to show the real Luc. You're putting on a mask. And he was saying, what, do you want me to cry in front of the camera to show them that I have feelings? And I was saying, no, you don't need to cry. I just need to see all your flaws, or maybe how it was hard for you, because when I hear you, there was no problem. I wanted to be a wushu master, and I became a wushu master, obviously. And I mean, even the old race aspect, he didn't want to talk about it. Like, you're Black in the 80s in China, of course you have to suffer racism. And I think he didn't want to victimize himself as well. So after the movie was done, he just told me, it's Luc, so he's not very expressive, but he just told me, you were right. And he told me, I'm happy on how I'm perceived on the screen. And I was really happy, because I didn't want to disappoint it as well. I mean, I'm not working for him, but the moment he started to open to his feelings and talk about his struggles, I really didn't want him to be disappointed on how I edited it and showed it on screen, that he felt betrayed, because he was really, really, really suspicious at first.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge responsibility to have as a filmmaker to ensure that, you know, the protagonists in your film are really taken care of and don't feel betrayed, and that everything is consensual, and there's this mutual agreement throughout the entire process. And so I really respect that that's something you were that came out of the process for you. I'm wondering, do you have a sense that, you know, after the film um premiered and kind of it was out there in the world, how has that changed or impacted Luc's life, if at all?
I think he did a lot of tour in China. I mean, he was already known in the wushu community, but he did a lot of traveling throughout China with the movie to present, to talk about his life, to talk about wushu, and it's abroad. Usually, people were not really aware of him. But I know, for instance, in Gabon, when it was premiered, people were shocked when they came out of the screening saying, this man exists and he's Gabonese and we don't know about him. Like, we need to create a fan club. This is not normal. This is typically the kind of example we need for the African youth. I mean, we talk about always rappers, footballers, and politicians. Like, they love politics in Gabon. And here we have this great, great, great example of someone. And it's how he was perceived in Africa. He was not that known. I feel like he went to a lot of country with the movie to present it and received a lot of message, himself and myself, of young Africans who were really happy to know him and start following him, and have a bigger fan base in Africa.
That's really special, I think. I'm not sure if, yeah, you can still hear me. Now, I was just saying, I think that's really special because there's a point in the film where Luc speaks about going back home and training these young children in his discipline in kung fu, but also having to experience a lot of negative feedback from people in his community. And I think he expresses something of feeling like the Africans around me didn't want me, but I also didn't belong in China. And so just this tension of kind of feeling placeless and rejected on every aspect of your identity. And so I'm really happy to hear that that's something that's come out of the film, some sense of like appreciation and belonging, especially from people on the African continent. I want to go back to
When
yeah, please go ahead. I'm listening.
No, I just wanted to say that when it was screened in Gabon, the people were very expressive during the movie and during this whole part when he talks about how he's not accepted by his own country. People were screaming and shouting in the room because they were mad at the authorities for not accepting him. And when it was, I thought it was really moving because, and I wish he was there because he couldn't be there. But when he won a gold medal and we hear the Gabonese national anthem, everybody stood up and started clapping like they were there with him in the receiving his medal when he was all alone in this room in a little remote town of China. And I told him, and he was so moved to hear that the crowd was really cheering for him, and we're so mad at the authorities for rejecting him like this.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that happens so often in many parts of the world, but also, I mean, I'm from Zimbabwe and I identify with it from being from the continent and having an understanding of that. And I think that's why your film is so important and so special, because it means that there was a gap between kind of Luc's work and reaching people who actually appreciate him. I think oftentimes, especially with people who are working and doing brilliant things abroad, the people who are aware of that, because there's a lack of a documentation and a lack of sharing the story, the people who know are the people in authority, and they have agendas of their own that might not always coincide with the spirit of community and the spirit of sharing stories that will impact people and bring people together. And so just, I mean, I'm just gushing about your film, of course, but just massive congratulations to you for bringing that story to Gabonese people.
Thank you.
I want to go back to the film, the filmic aspect of the film. I know that you know, you incorporate archival footage into the film. I want to know where that footage is from, how you came across it, and why you found it important to add in the film, because I thought it was really interesting to see kind of this footage from way back, speaking to the themes of the film.
Well, you have to know it was a complete coincidence. I'd found the archives. I mean, I did a 1 month recce in China with him to be with him and to meet all the people that would be in the documentary, to make sure, I had the right information and everything. And it's as we talk that he tells me randomly that he has 45 minutes of footage, black and white, shot back in Gabon. And I was screaming, "Are you crazy? You have this precious material and you just tell me that out of the blue?" And he said, "Oh yeah, it's here." And he gave me a copy, and I have 45 minutes of footage, black and white, back from then. And of course, for me, it was obvious that he should be in the movie, because the movie is also about his past. And of course, you hear his friends talk about him, and it's great. But what's better than actually seeing the footage is like it's more real, and even added that I thought a bit of magical aspect to the whole childhood thing, because it makes you go even to immerse yourself in this childhood and be with him, these little African kids, and actually see for yourself how he was back then, and already how committed he was, and how actually he managed to, like a guru, to convert all his little friends from all over the neighborhood to his wushu philosophy, even though he had never been to China and had never actually taken any wushu lessons. It was only recreating what he was seeing in Chinese movies.
That's amazing. I had no idea that it was actually Luc in those films, and that it's actually never before seen footage that you managed to get in the film. That's such a magical filmmaking experience, I imagine. As a filmmaker, it must be such a special moment.
Oh, yeah.
To find such a treasure like that. Absolutely. You bring up this idea of his friends, and kind of how, I mean, they play such a huge part in the film, and really funny at times, just really giving a bigger picture of who Luc was as a child, and maybe his more youthful and innocent interests. And there's a moment towards, and I think this is how you close the film actually, where all the friends come together in the cinema, and they're all laughing, and they share this really heartwarming moment of like recognition. How was that for you to experience this reunion of friendship? How long had they been apart for, and what was that process of bringing them together, and why the choice of a cinema?
So again, it was lots of great coincidences on this movie. Is as we're shooting, we hear that one of his friends, the light skinned one, who's left Gabon for decades, is now in Gabon. And I hear that from another friend that is back in Gabon. We managed to have his number and say, "We're doing a piece on Luc. Can you be in the documentary?" And he says, "Yes." I haven't seen him since he left actually for China, so like more than 20 years. But yes, I have all the memories are all fresh. I want to be part of it. And when we did the pre-interviews, I could see all the great stories, very vivid. Like you could see that really had a real impact on him. And I didn't tell them that Luc was there, and I didn't tell Luc that his friends were there. I wanted to capture the reunion right in the moment to see how it was going to happen, and it was magical because it felt like they'd seen each other like the day before. They quickly, I just asked them a question. "Oh, so do you remember back then?" And then I let them. I'd forgotten that me and the crew were there with them, and they talked and talked and talked and talked. And why the cinema? Because for me, it all also started with this is the magic of cinema. It all started with cinema. It started with him watching a movie and being completely shattered in his soul, in his spirit. Like there was a calling, and And that's where he spent all his time dreaming away, because back then there's no social media, there's no internet when you can watch, images of China if you want to travel a bit. You have nothing. We're in the 70s, and the only window to the world that he has is cinema and those kung fu movies. And actually, that's why also he has a bit biased vision of China, and thinks when he's going to arrive, he's going to see horses and knights, just like in the medieval Chinese movies he was seeing. But it all started with cinema and this particular atmosphere that you have. And and also the way Frank talked about it, that everybody was in the room with him. If you go to Gabon and watch in the theater, good luck, because people feel what they're seeing on screen. They comment, they leave everything 100%. And actually, just a little aside, there was 70s was a lot of kung fu movies, but also lots of film from Bollywood. Yeah. And also in West Africa. And I have a friend from Burkina Faso who told me, we had a lot of Bollywood movies. Actually, his sister was more into Bollywood movies. She said, when I go to the kung fu movies, I would get hit in the face because everybody's fighting in the room. So I would go to the Bollywood with my friends, more very romantic movies. And she told me that there were people speaking actually Hindi that never been there, but they could speak Hindi because they were watching lots and lots and lots of Bollywood movies.
That's amazing. We have another film on the festival program this year called Johnny 2 that focuses on a very similar issue of this Bollywood film that becomes really popular on the African continent and influences the culture completely. And I want to talk about that actually, how cultures are represented on screen and the audiences for these representations. Do you think that is an avenue for people to learn about each other and kind of expand what we know of the world? Or do you also kind of acknowledge the kind of dangers that come with, misrepresentation and stereotyping and that kind of thing? How do you think we should approach how cultures are represented on screen to audiences of perhaps different contexts?
Well, I think there was a great evolution. There was a time when all the stories, of course, from the African continent were mostly told by foreigners or the West. And the consequences in most of the time were a misrepresentation of what Africa was. And, for a lot of time, people and still are sometimes associate the African continent to wars, genocides, diseases, and things like that. But now with the democratization of filmmaking, you have a rise of a lot of filmmakers from the continent talking with their own voices about their own continent and helping changing the narrative of what it comes to Africa. And it's great because you don't need to have millions of dollars to make your movies today. And now there are multiple voices. There was the time when there was only one voice, mostly from the West, with usually a very biased vision of what Africa, and sometimes still is. Sometimes American series set in Africa. I won't say the name of the series, but I just saw an episode last week, and I was laughing in front of my screen. A very famous American show, and they started the series in Africa, in Cameroon. And happens, I have my parents in Cameroon, so I go a lot there in Yaoundé, and they say, oh, Yaoundé, Africa. And you're in the forest with child soldiers and generals. You don't have that in Cameroon. But it's there, and I was thinking, okay, once again, and the typical American wants the difference. But anyway, today with the multiplication of voices, it helps changing the narratives when it comes to the continent and all the different cultures, and even a thing like Netflix that produces in lots of movies. Last time I was saying, oh my God, I traveled in Jordania with a series, then I went to Iceland done by local crews, and it's totally different from if an American had done, for instance, a series over there or a movie over there.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what you're saying is such testament to how phenomenal it is that we can have a Samantha Biffot in the world, a Black African woman filmmaker who's able to tell stories that come from an authentic place, about her own people, her own culture. And so, yeah, it's what a time to be alive. I guess in that spirit, there must be so many people who are watching your films, watching your work, have watched this film, and are really inspired by your work, honestly. And I'm wondering if there's any advice that you would like to share with them about how to navigate the industry and to navigate life in general. Just what would you say to young people?
For young people, from what I know, so from my experience on the continent, because I've mostly worked here, is to say it's clearly, I would say, a great time to be alive, because there's a great emulation happening right now. It's happening right now because the in TV industry and cinema industry are very weak, sometimes almost non-existent in mostly Central Africa, but it's happening. So we are all being pioneers. So it comes with the excitement, but it comes also with a lot of struggles, because you clearly are putting the stones. So sometimes it can be so exhausting. So my advice would be you can go for it 100%, but keep a job aside to help you actually do your passion. That's what I started. I started with a lot of institutional film advertisement that I was not interesting at all, but it was my way for me to develop on the side passion and hard project with documentaries that I was directing or producing. And as the TV industry is evolving and cinema industry and more money and financing are putting, you can do the switch, but slowly towards doing fully only movies and documentary. But I would say to be careful. It's very fragile and in construction industry. So if you really want to do it, I'd say have something on the side. I know it's boring. I know it's frustrating, but if you really want to stay, instead of burning your wings into doing only that and saying, I'm broke, I cannot do anything, and then abandoning it for good. Here it's more on the long term, have your side thing and work on it and just believe it's a passion. So it's the most beautiful job in the world. It's exhausting but if you want to tell stories to the world, communicate with the world, and tell, in our case of Africa, other stories of Africa, you have a big responsibility. We always think, oh, politicians are the one ruling the world and having an impact. No, it's not true. We are the one with the image of what we tell the stories. We're the one who are changing the mentalities and shaping people's mind with TV. It's great in cinema.
Absolutely. That's so empowering. And is there anything else that maybe you want to share about the film or about yourself that maybe you haven't had an opportunity to share?
Not myself, about women in general. I'd like to encourage women to do. It's a very macho world, and it's not only in Africa, it's everywhere. It's very, very lot of men. So I would say to girls to not be afraid to jump in it. Same, it's going to be hard, but if you keep focus on your goal, which is what you want to do, you will make it. But it will be hard, but do it. Don't be afraid. I mean, from my experience, men will tend, the moment get too technical, directors, DP, and things like that, they tend to look a bit with despise. It can be intimidating. I was intimidating when I started, even as a young student back in cinema school, where they all wanted to push girls. I don't have anything against makeup artists and costume designer. They are part of a movie process, but just don't, because I'm a girl, said go back there. No, you can be holding the cables, being a DP, being in very technical aspect of the job, and don't be intimidated. If you want to do it, work for it, and do it.
I mean, there's absolutely nothing more that I can possibly add to that. Thank you so much, Samantha, for being such yeah, just a powerful presence in our festival this year, and also
Thank
for,
you.
yeah, absolutely, for having this chat with me. And thank you to you, the audience who's joined us for this conversation today. Please sign up to African Motions newsletter to keep up with our festivals and events, and follow us on social media using the hashtag AIM Film Fest, or just finding our handle at AIM Film Fest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.